Work hard. Always think outside the square. Always find a solution for your clients. Learn how to do it efficiently.
Welcome to another episode of Season 5, Relentless Life on Your Terms. I have Rachelle Huynh with us. Rachelle, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Rachel's a friend and an associate now. We've been working together for how many years?
Maybe 11.
11. So I've been working with your firm prior to that. I think back, could be close to 20 years we've been working. Now, Rachelle, tell us a bit about your story, your firm, obviously where you started and where we are now.
So we are Blaak Huynh Lawyers, originally started by Andrew Blaak. He's one of the other partners. So he started Blaak & Associates maybe about 20 years ago, probably around the time you met him, specifically focusing on this particular area of practice in property that was relatively new at the time, and it was specifically to deal with investment property. And so he grew that and subsequently worked on matters outside of the Victorian jurisdiction. And at the time, there weren't many firms that were doing that. So usually if you go to a law firm, they practice exclusively within that state. So we do Australia-wide. I came to the practice 2012, and then I became the managing partner in 2018. So we are now Blaak & Huynh.
Now, I've spoken to you about that off camera before, and that was obviously a very, very challenging time due to COVID and everything going on. Tell us a bit about that and how you navigated through it, because obviously a lot of people were struggling at that point. Here you are, a great lawyer. I'm about to become a partner or buy part of this firm. Bang, I've got hit with the biggest challenge. How did you overcome that?
We had to really pivot to other areas of practice. I came from a background of, I was a criminal defence lawyer. So to really sort of look outside property now and sort of say, well, what can we do? Essentially, most lawyers will have some sort of basic understanding of general practice. We then sort of looked at the situation with COVID and sort of said, okay, what can we do? We then moved into areas like family law, which unfortunately during COVID was
Very
booming.
prevalent, yep.
A lot of people weren't doing very well in COVID, so they were seeking a lot of advice from family lawyers. So we then started taking on family law matters. We were taking on estate matters, wills, probates, just other areas of practice extending out from the property sort of area of practice.
Can I ask, being a lawyer, taking on a different service, a different product, whatever you'd like to call that, how challenging is that? Because obviously you've got the base fundamental knowledge of being a lawyer. Is it very transferable? Do you need to research so much more again? How does that work?
It is a lot of work in the background. So you really have to know what you're doing. So we have basic understanding, but to practice in other areas, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of case law research. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of liaising with legal counsel just to sort of get guidance and advice and things like that.
What's your favourite part of law that you're working in?
I'm not currently working in it. I am quite partial to criminal law. It was a really tough area of practice, but I love the things that it encompassed, going to court, all the things that you sort of see on TV, what you imagine lawyers to do. That sort of is a little bit similar to criminal law. So it was a little bit fun. I like challenges. I like being able to find a solution to a problem. And just being able to think outside the square. Like I sort of say to my staff, I usually don't take no for an answer. So as a lawyer, you need to get a little bit creative in how you can problem solve each kind of matter that comes your way.
And property law, how did you fall into that then? Because where did you start originally? What was the first law you practiced?
So I dabbled in a bit of family law, personal injury, and then criminal law. So I did criminal defence. I came to property as a change because criminal law got a little bit intense. At the time, the OPP opened a specific branch to deal especially with sexual offences. So you can imagine the kind of matters that were coming through. It was just getting a lot. And it became really difficult to sort of separate what you were doing at work and sort of going to bed at night and thinking about
The cases, what happened and all that stuff.
Well, when you're in criminal defense, you're defending the offender, the accused. And when you're defending the accused and then you've got victim testimony, you're kind of conflicted. There has to be a part of you that's kind of conflicted. I mean, practitioners are very good at separating the two. So I could run between courts. I did so many things and I was so removed from it. Like, you have to remove a part of yourself from it.
That must be the hardest thing to do.
Oh, the hardest thing is to listen to children's testimonies in court while you're defending the accused. So, time after time, it kind of gets to your psyche a little bit.
Of course it would. I can't even imagine what that would be like. So then obviously you went to property law, which is nowhere near as complex or nowhere near as challenging.
I had family
I've got
members
delays
that
in
were
my settlement now. That's it.
Completely different. Wanted to do sort of more corporate law. Didn't want to deal with terrible, sort of fractions of the world. It was a completely different sort of change. But, I picked it up pretty quickly.
What made you want to become a business owner after you were a lawyer? Did you always know you wanted to run your own practice?
Absolutely. Because you work so hard and you always strive to get better and do better. I always knew that I had the ability to sort of run the show. Especially because I was always just thrown into the deep end. I don't think that at any point where I was working that I had the kind of guidance that I provide now to the younger lawyers that come through. Like, you're just thrown into the deep end. I would be given a file and I've got 5 minutes to get to court and I'm running and reading the file and trying to work out who the client is at court. Like, this is what I had to do. Like, I would be the junior there, sitting in front of a Supreme Court bench or a county court bench full of QCs and senior counsel, and there I was, first year lawyer, trying to work out my way through these cases. I was literally just thrown into it. So
looking back at that in reflection, I guess throwing you in the deep end, you're always going to know if you're going to sink or swim, but more importantly, you're going to grow. In reflection, do you think that helped you immensely now, and also giving your team what they need?
Absolutely. You're kind of built differently when you're thrown in.
You are.
And I don't know, we just always thought that there would be no way to give up. Like, you've always got to find the solution and you just don't give up.
Because you either sink, or what's the alternative? If you don't swim, you're going to drown. So you got to keep paddling. You got to learn the way. So
drowning's not an option, though.
Exactly. So that's what I'm thinking. So when you get any situation like that, I remember this was such a funny story. When I started in real estate, something out of a movie. Mm-hmm. So I was only an in-home consultant. We're talking back in like 99 or 2000. The owner from a Brisbane company came in, dressed in a Versace suit, looked $1 million. He came in from the manager and he said, "Listen up, everybody. We're going to train you all for 2 days for 6 hours. Then we're going to send you out to the appointment. Some of you will make it, some won't. You come back in for one more day training. If you don't make it, you're fired."
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'll show you. But what a hard pitch that was. And I remember his name and I remember that pitch. But I remember we lost quite a few people that day because they thought, where are we working here? And obviously, it's a long time ago. We're talking it's 25 years ago. But for me, all I thought of is, I'll show you. After 2 days worth of training, but it was the hardest lesson in sales, the truest, but yeah. I responded well, but not everybody did respond well. But I think if they had the nurturing types, so like what you provide now for your lawyers, I think it would have saved a lot more of us.
Oh, there's a lot to be said about the nurturing type these days, right? I think our generation is a little bit different. This generation
maybe too nurtured in some cases.
I think so too. We did the long hours. We didn't even question it. I was having a conversation with Jessica, who's worked with the firm for 20 years, and we were joking about how, back in the day, you'd go out at night, you'd come home at like 5 a.m. Remember those days, Chris?
Yeah, it was a long time ago for me.
You still had the stamp on your hand, and you just get up an hour later, the stamp wouldn't come off, you just go to work and you do it. Whereas these days, people would probably call in sick.
Things have changed. They have definitely changed. And I think there's a fine line. And where I've had a lot of the common theme when I had today, because it's my third podcast today, it's all around when the people saw their kids They saw their parents as immigrants, like mine were, like yours, who work really hard. It
Mm.
was embedded in their psyche. They understood that was the way to go in so many areas. Even though they thought they weren't learning a lesson, or they might not, upon reflection, when you get older, it teaches you so much that hard work, it has to happen, especially if you're a business owner.
Absolutely. I think our background, in particular mine, is definitely a contributing factor to the way in which I approach my work. My parents were refugees, and that came with it a lot of expectation on our shoulders, my siblings and I, of making better decisions and making a better future for ourselves. And so we always felt like there's no way to give up, like you just have to keep going. That's what I was mentioning before. And I think that sort of stems from my parents' sort of psyche my whole life is, you just got to keep going. You can't give up.
What are some of the lessons that you learned along the way running your practice, running your business?
To not devalue your worth. I think that when you're in business, people will always negotiate what your worth is. And
Do you mean from a time or a cost perspective?
both. Well, your time is costs, right? Especially for lawyers. So we, ultimately lawyers, our business is our time and our knowledge. And people will always ask for your knowledge and your time. But I don't think that they correlate that to then it coming at a cost.
Of course it should, yeah.
And because they can't see it. If you go to a doctor and they, do surgery on you, you can actually see it. But with a lawyer, you actually don't see what they're doing. And what I found over the sort of the last 15 years is commonly people would say, well, what did you do? What were you doing? As though a whole file that you've worked
just
on
disappeared itself or worked on
just
itself.
Somehow just worked itself. So they don't see. And, I don't expect people to understand, but it's obviously the industry is so highly regulated and you have to do so much work to get where you are to be able to provide that kind of advice.
Saw it was like something that I read, and it was like a tradie. He came in, they asked him to fix something. He was there for 2 minutes, charged the guy $300. He goes, "You were here for 2 minutes." He goes, "What was that for?" It's for 2 minutes. Is that your rate? He goes, "The money was to know what screw to turn to make this work again. It wasn't the fact that I turned the screw. It was the experience and the knowledge to do it in a fast manner, because I've seen so many cases. When you do a service-based role, the experience to problem solve is people sometimes will not see the value in that or how expensive that is to learn.
Yes.
But it's very, very, I guess, different from that sense. So what advice would you give a up-and-coming lawyer that wants to start now?
Work hard. Always think outside the square. Always find a solution for your clients and learn how to do it efficiently.
What if I don't know what part of law I want to practice?
You start somewhere. Everybody starts somewhere where they can get a graduate position.
Yeah.
And then you work out what you like. From there, you obtain the skills, you cultivate the skills, the very basic skills, and that is, usually in legal writing, drafting papers, preparing court documents, how to speak with a client, how to look at a matter. Those are the very basic skills. You can start in any area of practice, which I sort of found in terms of feedback from a lot of juniors that are coming out. They sort of start wherever they can get the job. If they're lucky, they can, choose an area of practice that they like and they might get a position there. But if not, they'll just land somewhere where they can work. And from there, they work out what they want to do. Is
it easy to find work in your field?
In property law, I don't know if it's easy. Look, I don't know what the market is out there at the moment for grads. I mean, there's always opportunity out there. And I think in property law, it's quite just like sort of property sales, in the admin part of it, it can be sort of quite transient, like people come and go pretty quickly if it's just the basic admin. But good property lawyers stay in the industry for quite some time.
What sort of tenure would a good property lawyer have?
Easily, you want to do at least 5-6 years of solid practicing in property, and then you progress to, really working on litigation matters. That's where you get all your case law. That's where you sort of pick up if there's going to be an issue.
So in most cases, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, most lawyers get into the practice to become a partner. How long does that process usually take? I know it varies, but what would the range be?
I think it depends on the firm. You've got your boutique, mid-tier, top tiers, and your clientele base. You could get partnered these days at a top-tier firm if your client base is quite large. And I
From
think
a revenue
you can,
point of view?
from a revenue point of
Yep.
view.
In what sort of time frame?
Within a matter of 5 years.
It's not that bad.
It's
I
not
thought it's
that
a lot
bad.
longer.
That's actually quite rare. I do know a few people, but 10 years seems to be the better tenure to becoming a partner because most people wouldn't even want it. I mean, you can
Because
have
of
the
the stress
equity,
levels, you mean?
the knowledge.
Oh, the
There's an
won't get there, you
expectation.
mean?
Yes, there's
I
an
understand.
expectation that if you are a partner, you need to know these things. You need to be dealing with these things. Any time that somebody comes to you with an issue, if you're the partner and you
You need
don't
to
know,
problem solve it. So you need to gain the experience. It could take 5 to 10 years. And you've got to build, obviously, like a book, a database of clients, and then be offered that position.
yeah, you got to be like an encyclopedia. That's what I say to my staff.
Do you think now with everything going on from a technological point of view, AI, that it's becoming easier?
Should be. Everything is there. I used to have to use physical books. Now,
Have you integrated that now currently with the business? Are you starting to?
Absolutely. It's so easy. It just makes it more efficient.
Was it a concern of yours?
It is a concern in terms of the development of young lawyers. But ultimately, I think that it's on each person to want to develop their own personal skills. It's something that I've sort of said to them over the past few years is it's on you. I can provide you with as much guidance and resources as possible, but if you want to be that kind of practitioner that knows everything, then you have to do the work. There's really no shortcuts to that.
But even though the knowledge is so great, what I guess I always think it's experience. How would you get that experience if you're not doing that? Going to court, understanding those cases. Yes, you can read up on it, but how can that substitute the actual experience though? That's the one part that I don't understand.
Well, you can't ultimately substitute the experience. I think,
Because there's knowledge
fortunately,
and experience, they're different, yeah?
but case law gives you a fair bit of answers. So we're kind of in an industry where we can rely on case law because that's kind of our precedent. It gives an example of, say, for example, there's a situation where A, B, C, D happened. You can kind of correlate it to your current client's matter. And then you sort of look at how the judge works through or the court works through each step of the argument. And then you kind of go from there. You don't necessarily have to be the one going to court. Going to court is more like an advocacy skill. But I still believe that if you read through case law, it's still quite helpful. I mean, I've learned most of the areas of practice that way.
Through reading, understanding,
Through case
asking
law.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 2024, what's on the plans? What's on the agenda for the company, the firm, and for Rachelle?
For the firm, more so, we're really expanded into commercial law. So business acquisitions and things like that, potentially looking into M&A, which is mergers and acquisitions. It's traditionally an area of practice that top tier firms do. They do the really big M&A files. I think the smaller M&As are okay. So that's sort of what we're looking into at the moment, and obviously really growing the estate area of practice. So that's wills, probate.
That was a service you offered though, but for quite some time, I recall.
It was like a really basic service. I think we didn't push on it a lot, but we found that certain circumstances give rise to the necessity to have things like powers of attorney. And it became evident in some of our property matters where people would lose capacity, something would happen, that there weren't these documents in place.
What happens in a case like that, Rachel? I know it's how long's a piece of string question, but what's the most common outcome there?
You need to have a really good vendor to understand, because the process, if you don't have these documents in place, is long. And by the end of it, you're already in default of the contract. So it's a little bit tedious, and it relies on the compassion of obviously the vendor, which obviously you would know sometimes.
Very interesting. Yeah,
sometimes they don't have any. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And so we try to explain to clients in much more detail. We have an appointment with a solicitor to speak to them, just to reiterate how important it is to have these documents.
Because you don't know until you need them. Wow, I
People-
should have really taken that time.
Yeah, people don't know until they actually need it.
Now, we also wanted to talk about the museum.
The Vietnamese
Museum. Tell us a bit about that.
I attended a gala with my friend Diana Nguyen hosting last year.
Sorry, we're smiling. She was actually interviewed her yesterday. She's an amazing Vietnamese stand-up comedian.
She's fantastic. She's so talented. She's also one of my cousin's best friends.
There you go.
So I know her personally as well. Through that, obviously, you know, immigration is a massive thing in Australia, and in particular, the last sort of 50 years of it. The Vietnamese community really are one of the true success stories of immigration in Australia, if not one of the most, because a lot of us came as refugees. And when you think about refugees these days, you don't really think about the kind of stories that are coming out of the refugees that were Vietnamese refugees in the 70s and 80s. And so this museum is really, I feel like it's almost like a love story between Australia and the Vietnamese sort of community that came to say, thank you, this is what you've done and this is what we've created and what we've given back to the country.
So how do people help?
There is a webpage.
Which we'll put in the comments below.
And then you just have to click on it and it has a massive donate sign. They're hoping the project will be completed next year in 2025. It will be built in Footscray. And it will be the first Vietnamese museum in Australia.
So basically share the link to raise awareness and also donate to this great cause. So Rachel, you've obviously dealt with a lot of people's contracts when they're purchasing investment properties. What are some of the key things you'll tell buyers to look out for when researching a builder, a company like ours, or things they should look out for?
Good builders are quite imperative, because what we've seen over the last few years is a lot of builders struggling. And I, for the first time in years, started reviewing so many build contracts when builders were going under. So it's really important to really choose a good builder, someone with a reputable builder, history of just doing the right thing. Say, for example, having all their insurances in place and things like that. Going with groups that specialize in investment properties to guide you, a really good group, is really important.
That have the knowledge and have done it many times before.
Correct.
Because obviously, as over the Bremerton particularly, with builders, we've got to do due diligence back on how financially back they are, how long they've been around, what their product looks like, because it's so important, because we're delivering that product to our clients.
Mm-hmm. And further to that, just the entire process, because when clients decide to use their own brokers, say, for example, so this is completely separate from a builder, just even to use their own broker, it becomes an absolute nightmare, because they don't understand the way that investment property works. It's slightly different. It's not like you go out there and you buy a house to live in. You need a broker that understands how to work out your equity, your money, moving things around so that you could capitalize on what you have in order to borrow and invest.
But also have the same understanding. Conversely, when a lot of clients want to go to a conveyancer and not pay a little bit extra and go to a solicitor to give them different advice, you're buying a $500,000 investment, why not pay that extra money to really get the right advice, to understand and be protected?
We talk about this all the time, don't we?
Yeah, we do, because it's people spend so much money, but you're going to cut a corner to save in a very small amount of money when you think about it, to not get the right advice.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, to me, it's not a whole lot. I was speaking to someone from the LPLC, who's our indemnity insurance provider, and back in the 80s, they said when they were working on property matters, property conveyancing was billed at around your 3,000, and this is in the 80s. So we're now, fast forward, 35 years later, and it's barely even half that amount to do a conveyancing matter. So I think, as a legal practitioner, we have all the knowledge to do a property transaction. You go to a conveyancer, yes, it would be cheaper, but they don't have the legal background. So you're really relying on the fact
that it's so marginal. It's like when I write about, even in the book, when people try to do it yourself. You're trying to save money when you're purchasing such a big investment or such a big decision. One mistake can set you back tens, hundreds of thousands, but more importantly, can hold you back from that second, third, fourth property. When you build a good team of people, like a good firm, a legal firm behind you, and you've got a good broker, you've got a good real estate agent, they're the people that are going to help you win, not just buying one property, but buying multiple properties and really building that. So what are some of the things you could advise our listeners that are getting to look at properties? What should they look out for when selecting a good builder or things like that?
They need to do their research. And really, if they're looking at the wholesale market of properties, it's slightly different. If it's off market, you really need to find companies such as Reventon, and we work with a lot of groups who know what they're doing, and let them guide you through and explain. You don't have to believe everything, but if there's knowledge behind that and there's information, there's stats, stay informed, ask us the questions, and do your work.
So trust but verify, I always say, because two good things: look at track record, look at proven results, and do your due diligence. So if a company's been around a long time, they probably know what they're doing. You read the reviews and they've helped thousands and thousands of people. Like your firm been around for a very, very long time. I'm sure they know what a contract should look like, what a good builder should look like. Invest that little bit of extra money and get the right advice.
With relationships as well, Reventon's been around for so long. If you go with a reputable company, you will find that their relationships are great in the field as well. So you would have relationships with these developers or these builders, and you guys can sort of, work out when to step in if needed.
That's a very good point, and I've never actually thought that as well. You've also got the other relationships that go on the back of it. If you've got a long tenure, you know who's been around.
It's similar to us for the last 20 years. I mean, I used to be able to push through. I could get a lender to settle on something almost immediately if I just give them the day, because they have that relationship with us.
And they know who you are.
Yes. During COVID, we were the ones that were pushing for a particular document to be put in place so that we could then commence video conference calls to do these independent legal advices for guarantees of loan documents. Just things that we can do, and lenders trust us. They will push through a matter based on scanned documents because they've dealt with our firm for 20 years.
Because you're reputable and credible. So in summary, pay for good advice. I usually say the most expensive advice is the free and cheapest advice. Go to people that know what they're doing. So Rachel, thank you very much. As it's tradition and custom on the podcast, are you ready for your quick fire questions?
Sure.
Favorite book you've read?
Favorite book? I recently read, is it Boy Swallows Universe? The series is now on Netflix. Great book.
Yes, it is, apparently, yes.
Yeah.
Morning person or night owl?
Oh, night owl.
If you could have dinner with one historical figure, could be, who would it be?
Ooh, one historical figure. I was always interested in meeting, and it would be impossible, but Genghis Khan.
I was reading about Genghis Khan only 2 days ago.
Yeah, I just thought it was incredible what he was capable of doing back then in his army, and how far they penetrated into the West.
I was listening to seven rules Stoic Mastery, and there was quite a few rules that were relating to Genghis Khan. Favorite holiday destination?
Well, that's a tough one, Chris. I'm quite partial to Paris.
Last movie or TV show you watched and really loved, enjoyed?
I've been watching The Crown.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
If you could master any skill instantly, what would it be?
Cooking.
Favorite quote that inspires you?
Favorite quote that inspires me: be good to people.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. What's your guilty pleasure? What do you enjoy doing?
I'm such a literal thinker. I love my artistic side, and that is my justification for my incessant need to shop. But that is my artistic side of the brain.
So the shopping. I love it. Favorite childhood memory?
going to Vietnam for the first time.
What's something you're very grateful for today?
Everything. My family, my business, the opportunity that I've been given.
If you could only eat one cuisine for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese. If someone was to play you, an actress, in a story of your life, who would cast the role?
Look, I've been told I look like Lucy Liu. I don't know.
There we go. Charlie's Angels. Now, what's your favorite go-to stress technique? When you're really stressed, what's your go-to technique? What do you do?
What's my go-to technique? I like to think about, well, there's so many techniques. I like to think about abundance. So if I'm stressed, I think about abundance of all the good things that I have. Absolutely mindful practice.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, Rachel, how much have you enjoyed being on the podcast?
10.
Thank you very much. It's always
You're
a pleasure
welcome.
talking to you. Remember, if you watch more content, like, subscribe, and share for more episodes of Relentless. Thank you.